Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm so excited. This is Pirkei Avot, chapter 5. We all know there are 6 chapters of Pirkei Avot. 5 that were written initially in the Mishnah. This is the 5th one. And the 6th, when the rabbis in about the year, 200 of the Common Era, decided to do it between Pesach and Shavuot, they decided that they needed an extra chapter. So they made a chapter 6, which was not originally in the Mishnah. But here we've got it, and Jacqueline will do it, or excuse me, your Ira will do that next week. I get the fun one because this is the one that has all the numbers in it. We start out with things that are 10 items, 10 things were created, and then we go to 7, and then we go to 4, and they're so much fun. So what I thought I would do, shall we put this up? Let's see, I'm going to share a screen with you. And this is, it says Pirkei Avot 5:5. However, it's in most of our reference materials, it's 5:7.
You're not there yet.
I know.
Okay.
Let me get here again.
Sorry, I wasn't meaning to.
No, you're right. It just, I noticed that was happening. We were having a little problem. I have to get back to here, back to there, return to meeting, share screen. That's why Maida's helping me, because I am computerally challenged.
Yeah, who isn't?
I wouldn't be able to do it at all.
Okay,
Good
I'm
job.
screen sharing. Can anybody see a screen share now?
Yes,
What we see is your browser. You just need to
that's
open
not
it.
gonna do it. Let me get back to,
Click on Pirkei Avot.
Just click, Roberta, you're good.
Pirkei Avot 5.
You don't need to change anything. Just reach on your.
Pirkei Avot.
Now we've lost you. Not you, but the screen share is stopped.
now I'm gonna try it again because it's so much fun. Okay,
Hi.
Hi, Sigalit.
Hi, Sigalit.
Hello, Sigalit. Shabbat Shalom.
Remember, last week you have to be the initiator of greetings. So we want to make sure that we welcome everybody, right?
okay, welcome.
I discussed that elsewhere. Never mind. But it was a Pirkei Avot, be the initiator of greeting.
Can anybody else stick
I
this
can,
on? I don't know why I'm having
Roberta, I have it up on my screen. Would you like me to show it?
Yeah.
that.
Oh, wait. There you go. Mazel
There I
tov.
go, yay, rah. Okay. Thank you all for your patience. All right, here we are. All right, 10, first of all, let's just say a little prayer here that says, all Israel have a share in the world to come, as it is said, your people are all righteous, they shall inherit the land forever. They are a shoot of my own planting, a work of my hands, that I may be glorified. And that is as it says in the Sanhedrin, chapter 1, Mishnah 60. And if anyone, so that's what it says there. And the chapter itself starts out with 10 acts of speech was the world created. But I wanted to move on because the first few Mishnot are very, they're just very different. We later, starting with this one, get into Mishnot that are very specific. 10 wonders were wrought for our ancestors in the temple. 10 miracles. You look at the Hebrew. 10 miracles were made for the Beit Mikdash for our fathers. And the number one, think of these are so specific. No woman miscarried from the odor of the sacred flesh. Think about that. So these are all very, very specific things. And they're all things that are, nothing happened. So what they're telling us is that these other things, they're telling us that in other situations, a lot of women miscarried from just the horrible odor of rotten flesh, of the putrid flesh, but not here because God kept that from happening. Every single one of these is things that God kept from happening. So I thought it would be fun to talk about how much do we think about these things? No woman miscarried, and the sacred flesh never became putrid. And then I love this one. No fly was ever seen in the slaughterhouse. Do you ever have a barbecue outside and you're trying to keep those flies away and everything else? Not in the temple and not in their slaughterhouse. No flies were there. And on Yom Kippur, the priest didn't have any special dreams that he wasn't to share with us. I mean, think about that. And then he couldn't do the work. Has anyone ever read about the room where they kept all the firewood? The rains did not extinguish the fire on the wood pile. The wood pile that they had for keeping the sacrifices going. The rain, that stuff was all outside. It wasn't covered. The rains didn't extinguish the fire. And the wind, they thought of the smoke going up. That was going right up to God. The wind didn't blow it away. No, that smoke could go right up to God. These are the things they were worried about. No defect was found in the omer or in the 2 loaves or in the showbread. Anybody have thoughts about that?
Elsewhere in Talmud, in Yoma, they have a long discussion about how to prevent the high priest from having any emissions of any sort, whether it was urinating or defecating or wet dreams. So it's interesting that here they say that by divine will, it will not happen.
Well, this one is specifically in the Masuda commentary. It's specifically only wet dreams. Whatever. But it's interesting. That is very interesting. And if anybody wants to talk about the showbreads, specifically, what are those showbreads? Did you ever wonder about that? Anybody want to jump in there? Okay. Help us. No defect was found in the omer. The people stood together. Think about this at Yom Kippur. The people stood pressed together. But when they bowed down, like when they were saying, Vanachnu Korim, they had plenty of room. I mean, that's fascinating that they worried about that was a problem. And never did a serpent or a scorpion harm anyone in Jerusalem. I mean, and come on, guys, just jump in whenever you want. This last one I think is fascinating because makes you wonder where they got this idea from. No man said to his fellow, this place is too congested for me to lodge overnight in Jerusalem.
Very possibly, this is an anti-Christian statement. It was written around around 200 or so years after the birth of Jesus, roughly. And by this time, they were already propagating Christian texts, of course, and Mary is and Joseph were turned away. Well, that was in Bethlehem, granted, but
How far is Bethlehem from Jerusalem?
not all that far, I don't think.
And did they have to go to Bethlehem because there wasn't room in Jerusalem?
No, they went to Bethlehem because they had to return to the place of their birth for the census.
But the
they
Christian
wrote-
myth is that there was no room, so that's why they had to go to where they were.
Okay,
I don't know, but just except for these last two, these all have to do with things that are taking place in and around the temple.
well, that's right. That's
Oh,
exactly what it
I-
said. They were brought for our ancestors in the Beit Mikdash.
So I think the last two are kind of related to that too, Judith, just in the sense that 3 times a year, theoretically, everyone came from all the lands around into Jerusalem. So
True.
that's again, it's related to the holy days and related to sacrifice. I'll tell you my take on this.
Please.
This is a couple hundred years after any of these things could happen.
Yes,
And the hope is still there that they might happen again.
yes,
And as a result, all very nature-oriented things are characterized as out of nature. These are
Okay.
things that wouldn't
Mhm.
happen in a normal circumstance. If you had a slaughterhouse, you would have flies. If there
Right.
would be wind, it would mess with a column of smoke. I mean,
Right.
what's described here are all things that happen outside of the rules of science and nature. And
Right.
that is the way that these rabbis thought about the time in the temple. They don't have it anymore. It's been gone for hundreds of years, but they hope that they'll have it again. And so they're characterizing it in a way that takes it out of their own experience at the moment. I kind of think it's
Yeah.
perhaps saying it's sweet is a inappropriate response, but I see it as hopeful nostalgia.
May I throw something in also? This was Mishnah. It was oral Torah. So it was oral Torah that was written down later on. So it was not necessarily written beyond, it wasn't necessarily written in Yavna, or may have been written in Yavna, but it was the oral that they took to Yavna in their memory.
So thank you for that. So do you think this was written at the time of the temple? Or
no.
Sorry, not written, but do you think it was thought about with the temple activities being present? Or was it looking back whenever the oral tradition started?
Well, I think it was when the oral tradition started, and I think it's when, gosh, I hope it doesn't rain today. Gosh, I hope it doesn't rain too much that it puts out the fire. I hope it's clear enough. I hope there's no wind and the smoke can go right up. That's what I think it was.
No, you're right. This text was not written during the time of the temple. This was written hundreds of years later, at least 200. And they had no idea, really. They'd never seen what happened in the temple. All they had was the description in the Torah, and later Baraita and whatnot. But none of the rabbis who wrote this knew the temple immediately. They didn't know it personally.
And can I add one thing about miracles? I'm looking at Abraham Twersky's commentary, Visions of
Please,
the Father.
Esther.
Well, the text starts off, 10 miracles were performed. And then we talked about, when we read them, or you read them. But he talks here about miracles that are not always obvious, because they're things that probably could happen, sort of, but that they're still miracles. Says this Mishnah lists 10 miracles, all of which were supernatural phenomena, but their true nature could be overlooked. And then he quotes from the Psalms that David said, God performs miracles alone, which the Talmud interprets meaning that only God knows that these things are miracles and not just natural events. And has the phrase, it has been correctly said, we often say things are coincidences, says coincidences are really miracles in which God preferred to remain anonymous. So that's one of the pieces I pick up from this, is the notion of sometimes, you know, things, oh gee, an unusual event happened, or isn't that nice that happened, but for many of us, we don't look at it as God bringing a miracle, or that it's something beyond. So I found this discussion of miracles interesting.
I agree. Now that is written that is a very early. It's on 1 or 2, isn't it? On chapter 1 or 2?
What I've just read?
Yes.
No, I mean, it's about this specific one.
Okay. Okay,
Because it
good.
starts off 10 miracles were performed for our ancestors,
Oh, all right. All right.
right?
So
Yeah.
they're saying that those are very specific. God made it so that we didn't get bitten by the spiders.
Right, but we may not see it as that. We just
don't
think, oh, how
understand that.
lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just what a coincidence, or what a lucky event. We're all crowded together, yet we still have room, to prostrate ourselves when necessary, or whatever.
Right.
You know, what a
right.
lucky thing, but really it's one of God's sort of hidden miracles. I mean, it starts off 10 miracles.
Right. You're right. You're right. That's
They call that, the Orthodox call that hashgacha pratis, I believe. I learned that at work. What I call the cosmos, but it's that God is involved in our lives, even if we don't see it, or something to that effect.
even when we don't recognize it.
Yeah.
I have to say also, I find it interesting where the texts were written from the much more traditional belief system that God was and is actually, for the Orthodox, still an active player in our lives. And from the conservative perspective, where many of us, and certainly the leaders at the synagogue and so forth, nobody's really promulgating that view that God's actively involved. So it's interesting to me that we still want to study and learn the text, but some of the underlying assumptions are pretty different.
I agree. That's wonderful. Anyone else? Please share your thoughts, because this is all that's how this is. That's what the rabbis were doing, sitting around the conference table. Okay. We can come back.
Of
if you
all
have any-
things, of all the possible miracles that God could have done, why these 10? I mean, there are dozens of other things that one could imagine. I mean, offhand, I can't think of one, but where God's intervention could be a sort of considered, it could be a miracle, but it could be just, oh, we're so lucky that it didn't rain today. Think of,
We're lucky
think
that
of
it didn't rain today. A supernatural intervention, luck that it didn't rain.
and I know, but I'm trying to think of another one, because
More
there's
is
surely many
coming,
more.
Judith.
I'm sorry?
More is coming. I mean, the other parts of
But
this.
those are 10 things. These are 10 miracles.
Understood.
Okay.
So, I mean,
Are you troubled by this?
no, I'm not
Okay.
troubled at all. I'm just wondering, the rabbis, it seems to me that there was always a reason for what they were either saying or questioning.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
arose from something that was going on in their time that they needed to explain or
Exactly.
explain away.
Exactly. It arose from something that happened at that time.
So what was going on that they needed to pick out these 10 things
Must have been having a lot of spiders.
How likely is it that a woman miscarries from the smell of the sacrifice in the temple?
I think it was a problem, and that's why they talked about it.
Well,
Otherwise, why
it
would
must,
they talk about
it
it?
must have been.
Right. That's exactly the point that I was thinking about when I was reading this. It must have been a real problem that everybody went up to the Temple Mount and the men were walking one direction and the women another direction. And all we read about these things, and a certain number of women were miscarrying there from the odor. And it says in the commentaries that that odor was strong. And
It must have
they
been.
thought that it was women were miscarrying from the strong odor.
Or maybe they were, women have miscarriages, and
They,
Right.
so it maybe wasn't from the strong odor.
no. Well, no, but they're attributing it to the strong
They
odor.
were, certain number of people were attributing it to the
Right.
strong odor.
Right. Yeah.
But
Well, maybe
these are all things that they were hoping weren't going to happen, that obviously were happening, but God was preventing them from happening. Yeah?
I think it's interesting what, if I'm understanding this is what I'm taking from Judith's comment, that it's interesting that these 10 things were chosen.
Yes.
And you could probably delve into every single one of them and say, what was going on? Why did the rabbis decide this was important enough to enumerate and to bring about? And that's what I take, not that we need to go into each one. I just think that's what I take from what Judith's saying. I don't know if that's
Yes.
I don't know if that's what you're
No,
saying.
that is what I meant. That
yeah, Judith, I'm putting myself in a place of debate, right? And it may have been that someone sat and said, well, this is the opposite of what I was saying before. Maybe someone sat and said, yeah, the temple, but what was it like really? I bet the meat rotted, the smoke didn't go straight up, so forth and so on and on. And this is the rebuttal. No, there were miracles. None of those natural things.
God protected us.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe that's why it's here. To your point, Judith.
yeah, I mean, it could be. We don't know, but generally, it seems to me, at least from my limited experience of Talmud, that if they're saying something, there's a reason for it, either because something was happening or something was not happening that should have happened.
Yep.
We're all agreeing.
Anybody disagree with that? Okay, well, why don't we read the next one then, which I talk about loving a text. 10 things were created on the eve of the Shabbat at twilight, right before Shabbat started.
Can you share?
Excuse me?
Can you share, please?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand you.
Are you going to share the screen share?
Thank you.
Okay, anybody want to read this for me?
Could you scroll down a bit?
I can.
Thank you.
Anyone volunteer? Jump in if you do. Jacqueline? Yaira?
I'm putting that, you asked me to get the page number in Lev Shalem, and Pirkei, chapter 5 is on 252. And I was just about to put it in the chat.
Okay.
All right. So 10 things were created on the eve of the Sabbath of twilight, and these are they: the mouth of the earth, the mouth of the well, the mouth of the donkey, the rainbow, the manna, the staff of Moses, the shamir, I love the shamir, the letters, the writing, and the tablets. And some say also the demons, the grave of Moses, the ram of Abraham, our father, and some say, and also tongues made with tongues.
That's your favorite is shamir, mine is tongs.
What is shamir?
Shamir was the worm that could eat through the stone because if you remember, the instructions are no implement can be used to strike the stones in building the Beit HaMikdash. And so how are you going to cue these stones? By means of the shamir, a
Got
worm.
it. Thank you.
Do I hear Esther?
Which Esther?
Do I hear Esther F. talking?
No, I'm not. I'm actually looking for something about
Okay.
what you read now. Because I don't believe it's correct
Which one?
about Shamir.
You don't think this shamir is correct?
Correct.
All right, let's see, that's,
I want to see what it is.
I
Okay.
have the reference for you if you want. It's from Mishnah Midot, based on Exodus 20:22 and Kings 6:7. No iron tool could be used for the hewing of the stone of the altar. Rabbinic legend therefore has a remarkable rock cutting worm to hew the stones. Also in Talmud Gitan 68a and Soda 48b.
shamir, by the way, in Hebrew is ha-shamir.
Shamir is not petrozelia. It's okay.
Still. Like a sponge.
there, correct. יעל, את צודקת.
Which is what, please?
In Hebrew, Shamir is there in English.
I'm sorry, it's
I
what?
didn't understand the word.
Dirt.
D-I-L-L.
No,
There.
I thought it was D-I-R-T, dirt. I thought it was, is that,
No.
no?
D-I-L-L.
D-I-L-L.
D-I-O.
Bill? What is Bill?
Dill, the herb?
Drill, D-R-I-L-L. No?
Oh, drill, that makes sense.
No, dill, D-I-L-L.
Dill, yeah, what is dill? The green herb that we eat, or is there
Yes.
something?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes. All right, so it doesn't really fit, right? Dill
Yeah,
doesn't.
it's not consistent with,
One of those interesting
With the
things that
biblical.
happened with modern Hebrew.
I think so. That would make sense, wouldn't it? Because it's not something that's consistent with the text.
Correct.
So why all these 10 things created on Shabbat Eve? What sense does that make to anybody?
So I'm
Well,
gonna
God-
jump in here because I got a problem with these.
What is your problem?
My
Please
problem
jump
is
in.
too many of them are not usable on Shabbat.
But they weren't used on
Ah.
Shabbat. They
But-
were
but-
on the twilight, right before Shabbat.
But why make them if they can't be used?
I think the point is that it's not whether they can or can't be used on Shabbat. It's just that God created them and he did not create on Shabbat, but just before.
No, I understand that, but as I say, I look at these things, especially something like manna, which you couldn't collect on Shabbat.
Right?
The mouth of the well, you can't draw water on Shabbat. Why not make these things on Saturday night or Sunday morning so you can use them?
I think it's foreshadowing.
What?
All these things are going to happen later. We're going to hear about them later in the Torah.
Okay.
And I think it's foreshadowing. God is setting up the plot.
Okay, so
Uh-huh.
Like that. I'm not a literary person, but I'm going to use a literary, whatever, idea. That's what I'm thinking.
Well,
What's,
that's an interesting,
can somebody explain why it's Pia Aretz?
well, what is Piha Aretz, for one
I know
thing?
what Pia Aretz, I know the translation, but I need to understand why, what exactly does he mean by Pia Aretz?
Oh, that was where the earth opened up and swallowed up Aaron's sons.
Oh, is that what it means? Okay.
That Haaretz, yeah.
No,
Not Aaron's sons, wasn't it the
no,
Korah.
Korah.
the
It was Korah.
Korah, yeah.
yes,
Korah,
Korach's
yeah.
and company.
Well, in the same way, I suspect that the mouth of the donkey is from the Bilam story.
Bilam, you're right.
Uh,
Well,
Yeah.
that's why
And
I
the
thought it would be
rainbow
fun
is
to
the
talk about.
result. Sorry, go ahead.
I thought it would be fun to talk about these individual items, how we know them, what they're talking about.
and why these 10?
Well, that's almost a set, yeah. But just what are they when they say the staff? What staff are they talking? A lot of people had staffs. What staff?
Well,
Those
so-
things.
Moses' staff.
Moses' staff,
Moses'
okay,
staff where all those miracles happen.
right.
Particularly the water.
The water, did you say?
Yeah,
It was
he hit the rock instead of talking to it.
You know what these are? These are
What are
all circumstances where, according to the text, God intervened. Right? If you go through them, you see that they are all circumstances where God intervened and caused something miraculous to happen.
So what's Shamir? What did God do with Shamir?
Because the law was to not use anything made of iron and the altar had to be formed. So it was miraculous that this thing, whatever it is, be it miraculous worm or wood that would cut through stone or whatever it was some tool that allowed the altar to be formed without the use of iron.
And I'll mention
That's a new one
Tversky.
for me, by the way. I've never heard of that before, but it kind of fits.
What
Wait,
was,
which?
what,
I'm sorry, Maida, I didn't hear you. Which one were you talking about? That
I know,
doesn't
I'm
fit?
just saying, I've never heard of the Shamir before, this.
So according to the Hebrew Academy of
the Academy of the Hebrew Language?
yes, one is the deal, and the second one is a kind of hard stone that you use it to.
Cut other stone,
Yes, exactly. Cut other stones.
like flint. Because the requirement was no iron, but it sort of didn't say no other material. The question is, what material on earth could actually mold a rock that would be an altar?
Well,
Well, may
diamonds.
the Shamir, according to Barantura, according to the Matsuda commentary, is that it is a small worm which cleaves large stones as it crawls over them. Solomon, according to the Rambam and Rabbeinu Yonah, Solomon built the Beis HaMikdash using the Shamir. The Shamir was used to engrave the names of the 12 tribes on the stones of the ephod, the breastplate, and the breastplate, which was worn by the high priest. And according to Sota 48b, it explains that each name was outlined on the stones with ink, and then the Shamir was drawn along the outline of each letter. The engraving took place as the Shamir passed over the outlines of the letters. And that's according to Ber Tenoro and to Ferris Yisrael. Just so we know that we're not just making up stories. Somebody else made them up few people before we
No,
did.
this is in Bartonora. Roberta is reading to you from the interpretation of Bartonora, which is the accepted by the Masoret.
So there we are. It says that these 10 things were referred to, they were created on the very first Shabbat, Joe, before creation was completed. These had to be, hurry up, get it done before creation is completed. And why does the Mishnah tell us about these 10 things? That they were created immediately prior to the onset of Shabbos, after everything else was created. The 10 things were enumerated in the Mishnah that are basically different than the other things created during the 6 days of creation. Everything God created during the 6 days was created so there would be constant reproduction from the original prototypes. This is inherent in the words, created to be self-reproductive. The 10 things mentioned in the Mishnah were created separately because they would not be reproduced. For example, the tongs created from other tongs. Since their creation was for a specific time and purpose, they were created at a different time than everything else.
Thank you. I like that.
Does that fit?
It does. And it's like, God said, oh, there are these things that I need for me that are only special for me. So I'll make them, he says, oh, I've got to, and again, someone said, before Shabbos starts, I got to do this.
Got to complete it to get it all finished. Zeu, let's get this done and have Shabbat. I'm tired. Yep.
I have another interpretation from.
Go ahead. I just found something kind of interesting that I wanted to share with the group, but you please go first.
You sure? Yeah.
All
right. Well, I'm just going to say what Tversky says, that there are multiple explanations for why these things were created at the last moment. But he puts forth one that they came after Adam's sin. And because of Adam's sin, God had to change some things in the world. But the reason he didn't have these things until the very last minute is because he was waiting for Adam to do teshuvah and repent from his sin. And he says the majority of the 10 things in this list would not have been necessary if people had not sinned. The course of its history would have been different. So anyway, he has a whole description about this, but that would lead to the specificity and the need for at least some of these things. So it's an interesting discussion of sin and God's role and all that. So just another thing to throw out there.
What, Esther, any reference that comes from Rabbi Tversky we can always benefit from that. But while the other comments were going on, I apologize, but I knew that I had stumbled on something, and so I went back and looked through things. I put in the chat a link to an article in Hamodia, and it leads off with the provocative headline, "Has the Shamir been found?" Now, it's important to mention that Hamodia is the daily newspaper of Torah Jewry. Nevertheless, Avraham Heschel has written a very complete article that cites all sources in Talmud for the Shamir, and also about this sea creature. There's a complete explanation if anyone is interested. It's rather lengthy and involved, but it's a fun read. So I put the link in chat.
Thank you. Does everybody have the chat?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. That's very interesting.
It is. It'll either make you roll your eyes out loud or at least tickle your mind.
I'm having trouble finding the chat, but then what else is new?
The chat is on the bottom of the screen. There's the mute, the stop video, and participants, and then chat. And all you have to do is click on it, and it'll show up on the right-hand side.
Judith, if
Great,
people
thank you.
are in different operating systems, the screens are not laid out the same.
Oh,
So,
sorry.
no, so the
No,
tool,
no, thank you for being helpful.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Depending on both the device, exactly as Ira was saying.
I know I just stopped the
I
sharing. but
confused
that's
a long
because-
list of people by trying to be helpful. That's the only reason I know.
I know, it's like, oh no. That's why we need to be in the same room safely.
We need our room.
If we had started all of this just a little later in the season, you know, it's possible it would have been warm enough to have taken ourselves off to the tent for this, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
all
this
to the
is
good.
good. Now, this is as good as it's going to be right now. And I'm so glad that we can do it because we can run off and get our different books and things, our different material.
Yeah.
So there we go. Anybody else? How about the ram of our fathers and the grave of Moshe? I mean, what do we know about the grave of Moshe?
We
We
don't.
don't know it, that we know nothing.
Precisely.
We don't even know who buried him.
Yeah, we
Except
do.
we do know,
Sure.
we do know that his being buried or dying on the other side of the Jordan was the result of, again, of a discretion and not the original plan.
What was
We
the
can assume
original plan, Joe?
I'm assuming the original plan was he was be the leader, because when God said you screwed up and therefore you can't, it means something changed.
Good point. Good point.
So again, going on the assumption these things were created because they were last minute, oops, I didn't realize people were going to fill in the blank. The grave of Moshe is one more thing that wasn't part of the original vision.
Okay, so we pulled it out.
So we pulled it out. So he created another one, different place.
Okay. Okay.
why
And
tongues?
Yeah, well, tongs, because you need to have tongs to make tongs.
Oh, you kidding?
One
so these were
presumes
the original tongs.
they were the tongs that were used to arrange the wood on the fire, on the sacrificial altar. At least that would be my guess.
I'm not sure that there's a connection because it's in a different, it doesn't matter. It's good enough. It's certainly, these guys are always talking about alternate uses and reasons. And that's
Well, I can cite reference for tongs which need other tongs to be made. Tongs are made using another pair which holds the red hot metal for the smith. According to this view, God provided and with the original pair of tongs with which to make others. Just trying to be helpful.
No, that's great. God, who could
That's what-
create
I'm-
heavens and
I'm
earth,
assuming
could also make
I'm
tongues without tongues.
I'm assuming the character of God. That's just me, always trying to be helpful.
It was sort of a little chicken and the egg, right?
Well,
Yeah.
no, specifically because God, who could make heaven and earth and all these other things, could also make tongues without having another set of tongues. But he made the original tongues, and then all the other tongues afterwards were made from this tongue.
Okay.
Sort of like DNA. I don't know.
Good, Roberta.
Ladies, you'll excuse me, I have to jump off now. Thank you for doing this and allowing me to join you.
Joe,
very
thank you for
interesting.
joining
Appreciate
us. It was a pleasure.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Bye now.
Bye.
And it's not a ladies only thing.
Mm.
Well, we gotta get some men in here.
We had them, but they, I guess,
They said last week that they couldn't be here today.
They went bike riding.
Oh, okay.
They didn't all go bike riding, did they?
I don't know. I'm making an excuse.
mm, not
Just
my
like
week, not my
Have the
week
tongues.
to keep tabs on them.
Sorry, I thought I was muted.
Oh God, I've had enough trouble trying to keep track of my own husband. That didn't work out so well either. I'm not going to work on other people's husbands. Let's see. What else in here? What else in this list? The mouth of the well. What is the mouth of the well? Anybody? Hello?
The well that followed the Israelites in the desert, what we often refer to as Miriam's well.
Okay. And we
Am
know
I-
the donkey.
Am I noticing a theme? Or
What
maybe
is
I'm
the theme?
stating the obvious that all these things are kind of miraculous,
Not
or they
kind of,
perform miraculous things, or they're created to perform miracles.
Yeah, something like that. I
I'm
would agree
having a
with you.
little trouble with the letters, and the writing, although those were done by God, so maybe that in of itself, maybe there were no letters and writing before.
I was
Well,
going to say we take that for granted because we use them today, but
and let's not forget how the original letters were used in Genesis, that when God said "Vayi or," it was the original letters that became all the lights that ever would be in all of creation. So Carol, I was taught that in fact these, whichever 10 you want to filter out, in fact were miraculous. And one of the things that was stressed is that God does not interfere in the natural order of things, right? I mean, Newton's laws of motion, when you poke something, there's an equal and opposite reaction. These 10 things notwithstanding.
All right.
Anybody else have other ideas?
well, I'll just note that I think it's interesting that 10 were listed. And then there's this sort of addendum that, and some say also other things, which is just kind of an interesting construct, especially since it begins with demons.
It's
Isn't
the
that fun?
rabbis for you. They got to bring in the minority voice.
Yeah, it begins with demons. It goes on to the grave of Moses, which is unknown, right? We're not supposed to know where that grave is. And then the ram of Abraham, which I assume is the reference to the Akedah, which we're
Yeah.
also not supposed to know what happened to that ram because that's all tied up with the Akedah. So, it's one of those like, oh, and here are some other things that we don't know, we're not supposed to know about. Maybe we should also include these in things that were made at that last moment. I don't know. It's very interesting.
Sounds plausible.
About the demons, my Baron Toro says, after God created Adam and Eve, he created many other spirits, but the Shabbos was sanctified before bodies were created for them. Thus, they were remained as spirits without physical attributes. Another explanation is that this refers to the angels who inflict punishment on the wicked in the world to come. They were on a much lower level than the angels who ministered to God. Okay? So that's what this one says. Okay? Anybody else? Because we can, go for hours and hours on this particular Avos, this particular chapter. Wild beasts come upon the world for the taking of the false oaths. We can do a lot of this, but I just thought that those were things we could spend our hour on. Yes?
Here's a higher level question.
Okay.
How do these things inform how we live our lives today? What lesson can we take from this to be better in the world or to make the world a better place?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer. I just thought it would be worth throwing out.
Well, they always say that a good attorney knows what the answer is going to be before he asks or she asks the question. So we know what. Anybody have any ideas on that? It's a good question. How does this reflect how we live our lives today? Or does it?
I read that in the Bavli Talmud, there are different items. One of them, hold on. They said the mouth of the donkey. The mouth of the earth is to swallow the wicked people. And it says also that Aaron, Aaron stick the almond with the almond flowers, and some even the cloth for Adam. So some different items.
Well, it's interesting. You're talking about the staff of Aaron with the almonds on it, whereas this other one talks about Moses's staff, a different staff.
Yeah, and they also say, Moses' grave and a cave that Moses and Elijah stood
together.
Yeah, it doesn't say together, but they stood.
But they were both in that cave.
Yeah,
the same cave. So you were reading it out of when this Mishnah had been put into the Talmud.
Yeah, Talmud Bavli.
Yeah.
Well, some of them are hopeful. So maybe there's a message about hope here. I mean, the rainbow is the promise that the earth will never be destroyed by flood again.
Why do you think?
Go ahead, Esther.
Why do you think it's a rainbow? It doesn't say Keshet Ba'anan.
Oh, I'm looking at the English.
No, in Hebrew it's Keshet. It has nothing to do with the rainbow.
As in the bow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, so what is it in Hebrew? What's your translation?
Bow. B-O-W.
Yeah, but isn't that the standard way of saying
no
bow in the sky, which we call the rainbow?
No.
What is it?
Keshet Ba'anan.
Keshet Ba'anan.
What does that mean?
The rainbow.
Well,
Keshet is what we use to shoot the arrow.
Yeah, it's the bow, but I thought the bow that was in the sky as a sign from God was the rainbow.
No.
Okay, don't say no, just explain so I understand.
In Hebrew, rainbow, we say Keshet Ba'anan. It's a bow in the clouds. when you say only keshet, it means a bow.
Well,
Okay, so you're saying
Don't try-
because it is only keshet, it really means the weapon and not the rainbow.
Correct.
Exactly.
Guys, what I'll do is I'll open up my Chumash and find the story and see what the text, how the text refers to the rainbow.
Because
may I say that the rainbow is referred to the references by Rashi, Rabbeinu Yonah, Tiferes Israel.
My book, by the way, has Genesis 9, verse 13 is where it's also interpreted as a rainbow, but you could see what it says in Bereshit.
Yeah.
It's the same.
I mean, you could also say it could just be, that's the way the rabbis wrote, said rainbow.
I mean, could it be that modern Hebrew didn't want to leave it just as bow, so it had two words? Because the first word's the same, right? Keshet? Is that the word?
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
keshet. I mean, I have two commentaries in front of me and they both interpret it as rainbow. So that seems to be what people are thinking, but it may not match up with the Hebrew.
Yeah,
Correct.
Koran also
That's
calls it a
biblical
rainbow. Koran also says rainbow.
And Sepharia too, I assume.
Well, my only comment was that it seemed as though there were some hopeful things here. With, the donkey being able to speak to Balaam so that, against cruelty to animals, among other things. If it's a rainbow, that hopeful sign. Manna, which was how the people were fed and nourished at a time when they were in the desert. I mean, these are the given letters, writing, and tablets. That's a very, positive human thing. I'm just trying to see this as, gifts for human life, I guess, and a sign of hopefulness. That's all. I was looking for
Okay,
something
Ibn
positive
Ezra
out of it.
also has it as a rainbow, and Rav Kirsch also has it as a rainbow.
Okay.
As it is
Doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that Esther isn't right for modern Hebrew.
right,
Exactly. That's why I wanted to get out my Chumash because the nice.
This is what we have from it here, the
my
Schottenstein Chumash.
Yeah,
one of
okay.
It's the interlinear edition, which has the Hebrew right on top of the English, and they don't try to make pretty English. They just try to give the appropriate text reference.
Yeah.
And
Well,
what did it say? It says
think,
rainbow?
Roberta,
Wonderful to keep us on our toes, Esther.
yeah, we've sort of come to the end of our time.
We
Yeah.
thank you all though, and Esther, thank you for keeping us current with our Hebrew, and everybody, I thank you all for joining us today.
thank you.
and
all.
For
Roberta,
keeping me
Thank you, Roberta.
honest. Next week, Yaira will talk about Parsha 6, Pirkei 6, and there we go. Thank you all so much. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Hello.
And find your cheesecake and keep it safe.
Roberta, thank you so much for organizing this. And if
Yeah, thank you.
Ellen, are you
you
still
film stuff
on?
next week, just let me know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye-bye.
Bye, all. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.